I'm still waiting for a few parts to arrive for this 64 AC30, but a lot of them are here. So I'm going to go ahead and get started on the removal of stuff in hopes that the parts will arrive this afternoon. So it's going to look a little bit barbaric. I have found, especially with these fragile old amps, that it's best to apply as little pressure to each joint as possible. So if I am trying to desolder and detach this end's getting stressed out. So the first thing I like to do is just go through and separate them, so one end does not affect the other. I don't care about that old heat shrink. I'll be replacing it with new anyway. So. And you have to know what you're cutting. Don't cut this wire here going to all the cathodes. I've never quite understood why people put insulation on a ground wire when the only other things near it are other grounds. Anyway, I digress. Looks like a lot of these are just tack solders, so this will go pretty easily. That one had a little hook. This is original. I'll come back to that. That one probably has some mechanical structure to it. And as always, if this is the first time you've done something like this, don't just start removing things. Take photos, make notes to yourself, draw diagrams, whatever it takes. Sometimes the old solder is oxidized, so it takes a while for it to flow like this one. Gentle patience, no pressure, no real pressure. Let's see, I'll do these ends in just a moment. Besides being in my way, I don't trust a splice that I can't see, and that's done with electrical tape. When I redo a new splice on this primary wire, it'll be heat shrinked, no electrical tape. Electrical tape gets gummy and yucky and unreliable. It dries out over time and can just fall off. Now, on fairly large surface area solder joints like these here where these screen grid resistors are going, sometimes it's best. Now, on fairly large surface area connections like this terminal here where these two resistors are going to it, sometimes it's best to add a bit of fresh solder just to remind it that it is in fact solder and wants to flow. You're actually adding flux to the connection, which is what does the magic. Flux kind of cleans up the oxidation on the outside and lets it all just kind of start to flow again. And I got a tiny little drip. I'll make sure I clean that up before I leave this area. And I'll work from right to left. Top to bottom. Now, say I wanted to put the new resistors in, and I've got this terminal here which already has solder. A lot of guys will just take a resistor lead, heat this up, jam it through, let it cool. Sometimes they don't even wait for it to cool, then they'll snip the excess, and it's just kind of being held in place using solder as glue. We're going to remove all this old solder and do mechanical wraps with the new components before we apply new solder. got a hook. I think I mentioned in the first video on this amp that I detect the styles and working habits of two different techs before me. One very, very good and one passable. And I can tell who did what based on the quality of their work and how much support there is for things. These original grid stoppers here are going from pin 1 to pin 2. And I will recreate that, but I'm going to get the old wire out here at 1 and 2 here and at here, and I'll recreate that afresh with the new resistors. So I'm going to first go in here with some desoldering braid and get the excess out. Actually, I can use the solder sucker for that, I bet. Be a little bit faster. So I'm going to try to get some of that excess solder out of the way first. And that stuff really doesn't want to give up the goods because it's got so much oxidation on the outside. So what I will do is take these flush cut snippers, physically separate them so I don't have to use as much mechanical, I don't have to use any force that'll introduce mechanical stress. There's a big glob of solder here. Let me get that out. And yes, this can be frustratingly slow. Patience is a virtue, etc., etc. There he goes. And again, sometimes it helps to introduce a little bit of fresh solder to a joint. I know it can seem counterintuitive adding solder so you can remove solder, but it's a thing. There it goes. I also don't want to stay on any one pin too long because I am running at 700 degrees Fahrenheit, which is a lot, and it is a bit of metal going into a bit of phenolic plastic, so you can actually damage a tube socket if you overheat things, so let's not overheat them. Pin 2 is the actual grid. JMI Vox ran to pin 1, then from there to pin 2 for extra mechanical support. On some very rare EL84s, pin 1 is necessary to connect, but usually it can be skipped. You can just go to pin 2, which is what most of the modern Voxes do. And for any shot where my hand is blocking the view, I'm sorry. At some point, I will have another really good camera set up at the other angle, and I can alternate in the edit which view you're getting. I tried using my iPhone for that second shot, but the quality is just crappy and the colors are horrible. Don't believe all the marketing hype for Apple cameras, Apple phone cameras. They're okay for certain things, and I use them when I travel because I don't want to risk my channel's camera for vacation photos and stuff, though it's a really good camera. But there's a reason real cameras still exist. All right, the Better Tech did this, and he has this same negative lead, well, not negative until it's put in place, but the same lead from this 10-watt resistor is also going through this lug to ground and then to the cap here for its ground. So I will deal with that in a little bit. I'm just going to cut the resistor out and separate them here, because when the brown truck arrives with a new F&T dual section, this can cap's getting replaced. Now here I want to disconnect this wire from the old cap on the cathode bypass there, but I want to make sure I don't burn that wire behind it. That's the screen going off to the screen stage. All right, let's see here. Believe it or not, I'm getting a lot of solder out each time. It's just there's so much solder in here. To everyone out there using the little $10 aluminum solder suckers with the hard Teflon tip, or the big blue Edisys solder pults, which also have the hard Teflon tip, notice that I've not been stopping every 2 uses of this to get all the solder out of the tube and clean the nozzle and get the hardened solder out of the tip and all the other problems. I'm also not having the recoil that you get with the big blue Edisys. While I am not sponsored by them, I am open to the concept if they want to pay me. I've been using these engineer solder suckers for the past 2 or 3 years. I had the SS02 for about 2 years, and I just got the SS03, which I don't know what the difference is. They seem to operate exactly the same, that the diameter of the tip is a little bit different. But unlike the ones I mentioned, which have the hard Teflon tips, which wear out, this one's got flexible silicone, and it actually forms more of a seal when you press it against things. And the solder doesn't want to stick to it when you push it out. And I don't have a whole bunch of buildup inside. It's got a lubrication inside. It's great. Will not replace a Hakko desoldering station, etc. But for things like this, it works great. It's inexpensive, it's not noisy, and it's one less big blocky thing to have on your bench if your real estate is limited like mine. Occasionally that'll happen, where it hardens inside the tube and then stays on the pin or something. But in general, that works. It's very consistent. The next thing I want to do before I put the new stuff in is clean all this area. You can see all the dirt and discoloration caused by heat in this area. I like to clean all the sockets. I'll clean them from the other side as well. But I'll get in here now and try to get as much of the funk off as possible. Takes a while, but the results can be worth it. It is so nice to be working in an old JMI Vox where the heater wires have never burned up. It's really common for this string of heater wires to just get charred and smoked and have to be replaced. And it's all doable, but it's a pain in the butt to redo them. And I prefer not to if I don't have to. Just usually I have to. Things run hot and things can fail. When they do, the heaters often bear the brunt. I'm getting it up off the chassis so I can clean beneath them. I know this looks really crude, but it really works. I might get in there with a soft bristle toothbrush in certain spots. I don't want to do anything crazy. I don't want to give the guy a bill for 3 hours of toothbrushing his amp. But all this stuff in theory, could get dirty enough to actually cause corrosion to the chassis or build up a layer of dirt which becomes conductive. And that can be bad news. All right, so layer 1. Now I'm going to see what WD-40 does for us. Very subtle application. Spread with my finger. Guide it away from the tube sockets themselves, though I'll be washing them out with isopropyl again. And I'm going to let that sit for about 15 minutes, then get myself a cup of coffee and wipe up the excess and see what that got, because the WD-40 often will remove stuff the isopropyl won't without any added pressure. So time is our friend. All right, let's see what WD-40 and a little bit of time have bought us. Look at that. Comes right up. Couple of spots doesn't come up as well. Might need a little bit more. Maybe I didn't have an even coating, or maybe there's only so much any one solvent can do as far as reactions, and then it wears out its strength. And you need to do more. And I'm not looking for this to be mirror. This is not supposed to look brand new or anything. Just any dirt that I can remove in this time frame that I have it on the bench for this is a good thing. As you can see from the paper towel, I am getting stuff up. Someone out there's got OCD. They've been screaming at me to get this area right here. All right, I think that's about as good as I need to get it, because there is a total clock ticking, and I need to respect the owner's pocketbook. But I think that amount of work is fully justified, and I'm going to do this just to get this whole area a bit of a help, because I want to get the excess WD-40 off. I just made sure I didn't get any on the tube sockets, because you don't ever want WD-40 in a tube socket or in a pot, though I see people do it all the time. It's like my big fat Greek wedding where the woman cleans every surface, everything in life is cleaned with Windex. Side note, don't use Windex on Tolex if you like your amps. All right, what's left will evaporate. All right, so I'm going to let this sit about 10 minutes, 10 non-build minutes, just like that 15 minutes was not on the billable time. And then we will go through here and start adding the new components back. So it's time to add the new resistors. Now, I've got a bone to pick with Mauser. As great a company as they are, as fantastic a service as they are, sometimes whoever's at the warehouse is insane when it comes to packaging. So this package has 4 2-watt resistors, and they're bubble wrapped, which seems crazy. No need for that for 4 resistors. But if you think that's bad, look at this package, this huge package. You know what's in this package? 10 watts, 68 ohm, quantity 1. Let me show you the size of the resistor in here versus the package size. All right, so we got a bag. We got all this bubble wrap. Want some ASMR? I could do that all day. Inside that bubble wrap is more bubble wrap. Really kind of expensive bubble wrap. This one's in a self-sealing bag. You know, it's got adhesive built into it. This stuff is not cheap. They don't charge for this stuff, but inside all of that is this resistor. Really? Really? All that for this? So, as I unwrap all these things, I have a feeling I'll be taking my trash out 4 times today. Anyway, in here are some 3K 2-watt resistors. 3K versus the 1.5K that these originally had in JMI, because I'm changing the screen grid value to make the tubes last longer and to keep the behavior of the circuit much the same. I'm also increasing the grid stoppers. There are reasons for that which are beyond the scope of this, and I don't want to argue with people who like to argue about such things. That's not what Dick Jennings did or whatever. I don't care. So, make first bend. Arrgh. And a 2-watt resistor, why on earth would you use a 2-watt resistor for a grid stopper? It's not necessary. It's not necessary in terms of wattage or power or dissipation. It's just to get from this distance to this distance. These Vishay 2 watts do the trick. And because I am doing such a long span, I like using pins 1 and 2. So that's good. And now for the screen grids, we're going to use these 2-watt 1Ks. Now the issue here is this is long enough to make this span without doing a splice like the previous one. But right here, I've got this screen voltage very close, or will be, to the grid stoppers. So what I'm going to do is take advantage of the excess length and go beneath a little bit and put some insulation on this end. That's the screen grids and grid stoppers all done. Now I've got the new bypass cap for this cathode, and I've got this 68 ohm resistor. 68 is what they had in there as the amp came in. Originally it would have had a 50. I have a 50 as well. I also have a 75. So what I like to do is I will temporarily install one of the three resistors and see where we're at with modern wall voltages, and then make adjustments. When the time comes, I will make sure that these aren't mounted so they're touching, because this gets hot and caps don't like getting hot, so there'll be space between them. I'm not going to install them yet because I want to remove this chassis ground when I change out this filter cap, this dual 16. I'm going to take this apart and clean that area, so when I put it back together, I'll know that I have really good grounds there. So that's going to be when the big brown truck arrives later today, hopefully. The last thing I'll be doing in this video is disconnecting this white wire here, which in this case is the heater's, the physical center tap wire for the heater's secondary. And it's tied to ground here with this black wire, which is the center tap for the HT supply. I want to leave the HT connected to ground, but I want to disconnect the white heater's center tap. Let me move this away from it. Get some fresh solder involved in this party. Make sure I have a good connection there. I'm going to give it a physical connection. I usually do it over here at pins 4 and 5 of this last EL84 because it only has one heater wire in each pin as opposed to these which have two. So I've got a little more room. So these are little half-watt metal film flame-proof 1% that I quite like. I'm prepping them each the same. Sorry you can't see everything that I'm doing because my eyesight's not good enough to do this kind of stuff a foot away from me. And this is where that second camera with the second camera angle will come in useful, but this is what we got hooked into the top there, making sure the heater wire doesn't come loose. I could wrap it around this wire, which is cathode, but in these old sockets, they've got the center post, which is what this wire is attached to, and it's all filled with solder, so I can just bend these over neatly. Which is nice for a bit of air gap. And then place each one into that center post solder. Now, in theory, I'd want to remove all that solder and fish these through one of the holes in the side and then resolder it. Which would be the absolute best solder joint available to us. But in this case, these things have absolutely no mass on them, and there is no strain on them whatsoever. And they don't weigh, they don't weigh a damn thing, and they're not stressing anything. So that solder, which is holding up this massive wire here, is also going to hold them just fine. So discreet, out of the way. They're not going to contact the wooden panel on the bottom. And that is a better heater reference than the old physical center tap, which I will tape off now. Just bend that back over on itself. Slide some heat shrink over the whole thing. All right, it is still in the amp. It can be easily reconnected if a collector ever wants to have it original versus sounding as good as possible. But this will sound better, less hum and buzz. And I'll reconnect this primary later when I'm doing all this stuff in this area, because I want to take some measurements and stuff, and this is a good opportunity. But that's for another discussion. Thanks for watching. This has been a really long one. I know not very many people watch these kinds of things, but the ones who do really seem to love it. So this is one for you guys. Thank you.